All right. Well, welcome everyone to ICON's annual celebration. This year, again, we are in virtual mode. And generally, what we want to do at our annual meeting when we have it is to do some sort of program or presentation. And so last year we did a panel online, and this year we have decided to focus and share with you some of the research that we did, which was a deep dive into some information or situations in our community that concerns us. So, right, first thing I want to do is just turn it over. Hold on here. All right. And I'm going to introduce Bill Baskett. He is the chair of ICON, and he will welcome us.
Bill, you're muted.
Welcome to ICON's 2020 annual meeting week. Presentation focusing on the city's recent problem property report. I wanted to thank everyone for making time to join us tonight to discuss a solution-based path forward with problem properties across the city. Before we start tonight's presentation, I wanted to call attention to the other related annual meeting events this week. Each day this week, we are announcing Good Neighbor awardees and premiering a carpool karaoke style ward tour video. On Monday, we released the Good Neighbor Business Awardee and the Ward 5 carpool tour. Yesterday, we released the Good Neighbor Organization Awardee and the Ward 6 carpool tour. Tomorrow night, December 2nd, we will announce the Good Neighbor Individual Awardee and Ward 8 carpool tour. Finally, on Friday night, December 3rd, we will release the Good Neighbor Public Servant Awardee and the Ward 9 carpool tour. Next slide, please. We would also like to recognize the 2021 annual sponsors. A very special thanks to O3 Internet Consulting and Lori and David Farrell. We appreciate your partnership and support over the last year. I would now like to turn it over to Jill Steiner, ICON Events Chair, to take us into tonight's presentation. Jill?
So welcome everybody, and we're going to just, as it says, we're going to deep dive, so we're going to dive right in. So these are some of the areas that we're going to cover tonight. We will make sure you understand the mission and property committee, what we're doing with ICON, and the kind of the focus areas that we went into in terms of what we wanted to look at and the discussions we wanted to have with the city. We wanted to kind of bring forward the current conditions and concerns and share with you a little bit the research that we have done. And then what are findings and outcomes. We do want to share with you what was communicated to us from the city about what they're doing. And then finally, we want to wrap up with a call to action. This is just skimming the surface. Even though we call it a deep dive, we're still in the shallow end, people. So we're hoping that we're going to be able to kind of get some action going and get people interested to kind of take the pieces of this and be able to dig a little more deeper. And really what we want to get to is to stop maybe sharing the concerns and the complaints and get to the solutions. That's our goal. So you have before you what the mission is for ICON and our strategy for what we wanted to do. Within ICON, there is a subcommittee we call the Problem Property Committee. It was established in 2017. And the goal was to identify problems and bring solutions, not just, well, everywhere in Springfield, but prevalent in older neighborhoods. Specifically, the problem property states the city suffers from long-term blighted property that reduces the appeal, property values, and quality of life for residents. This is a particularly serious issue in older neighborhoods. Having such a chronic nuisance properties cleaned up and out of the city's business will result in better quality housing stock and benefit the city through increased tax revenue and decreased enforcement costs. It will also help neighborhoods by removing disincentives to homeownership and investment by responsible landlords. So just to share a little bit, these are our areas of focus that we want to kind of dive into. Garbage, property, and just large item pickups that are left on the curb, in the yards, in the alleys. What we're looking for in all of these areas across the board is compliance, consistency, and accountability. And those we're going to drill down on hard, and we want to hold people accountable for that very specific things. So these, if you live in any neighborhood in Springfield, for the most part, will be common sites. The garbage, the properties. You can see that this house was cited, and it was cited so long that the sign is, the posting is even coming down and rotting. And the large items, small and large, odd, and everyday, that seem to show up on the curbs of our city streets. So how did we do this deep dive? We want to share with you that if you're familiar with the Harvard Bloomberg study, that we were a contributor. Actually, some of the initial data that Harvard Bloomberg used, which was the intern that the city was able to get this, came first from the data that Icon supplied. It was the starting point. It was some foundational data that we had already done. Some of us have read these ordinances ad nauseum, and Bill, I want to call out, he knows these ordinances backwards and forwards. So I want to make sure you do that. We were looking at garbage, large item pickups, vacant properties, and abandoned properties. Through the combination of people within Icon, we attended ward meetings and really kind of took notes and discovered that mostly in all 10 wards have a lot of the same concerns. We also, city council meetings, Icon is a regular, attends city council meetings or monitors them, but also presents and speaks out fairly often within city council. We were able to have some pretty good access to the mayor's staff and departments. We had meetings, we had discussions, we had support. There were a lot of emails going back and forth, as well as in-person meetings. We had face-to-face meetings, more than one, with Public Works. We were able to meet with the treasurer's office. We were able to meet with the administrative court or with corporation counsel. So, and I will just speak to the fact that administrative court is extensive research on how many houses, properties are sitting in admin court and how long they've been there and what their disposition is. We have those information that we have dived into. So I also want to say that we do this as volunteers, and we do this as very passionate people. The intent of our report today and the information that we'll do in this presentation is simply to raise your awareness, ignite discussion, and engage everybody in further study. We want healthy and thriving neighborhoods. So what we want to ask you to do is give us grace if we don't quite get everything right. We ask you to join us in civil discourse and active listening and engage in the process. So that was kind of our disclaimer invitation to join, that if we say that we don't have something quite right, don't throw out every idea, because we might have missed something along the way. So findings and takeaways, we're going to break these down a little bit so that you kind of understand where we are. And just know that this presentation tonight is just skimming the surface of all of this. So let's start with garbage. On its very minimal basis, the garbage ordinance states that the property owner is ultimately responsible for weekly garbage service and containers with tight lids that have enough capacity to hold 1 week of waste. That doesn't say the renter is, it doesn't say the leaser is, it doesn't say the next door neighbor is, it says the property owner is ultimately responsible. It also states that the waste haulers must pick up the extra waste or report it to Public Works for pickup, and then additional fees are allowed to be assessed. The ordinance also states that if there is no service, and there is a procedure for determining that there's no service, that property can be assigned a hauler, and that money can be added to the CWL bill. All of that is lined out in the ordinance. But here are our takeaways in regards to that. So the process for identifying properties which don't have service is not timely and consistent. So we drilled down on this pretty hard, and I will tell you that through information we got from the city, that since 2015, 1,495 properties have been cited and identified as not having service. The process to be able to have this someone assigned and put it on the bill did not get established until 2019. And the very first practice pilot of whether it would work did not happen until 2021, after we brought forward our garbage proposal and shared with them that this was something that was called for in the ordinance and yet wasn't happening. So that'll give you an idea about that. The other part that has come aware of this going back and forth, and so we provided an actual proposal of what we want to do and concerns, and the city actually gave us answers back in writing. And that report basically says that they don't do that anymore. They do not require the haulers to indicate whether somebody has service or not service. They quote, "If the location is assumed to be without service, then they'll check." That does not sound like a good way to do it. Thanks, George. I'm glad you could stay for a little bit. So the other part about the takeaways is that CityWorks is a software platform that manages all of this and has the capability of managing all this and more. It is not fully utilized. The staff is not fully trained on it. They're not held accountable or expected to use it in the field, and there's a duplication of efforts. So to give you an example of that, CityWorks is designed so that an inspector can go to the field with an electronic device, a mobile device, and be able to fill out the form with all the fields while they're in there. But they don't have them do that because they say it takes too much time. It's just easier for them to put it on a piece of paper. Then that piece of paper gets brought back to the office, and then somebody in the office inputs the information into CityWorks. So you can see there that if you didn't read the handwriting, if it didn't happen, if it got lost in the translation, that it just didn't work. So we actually had a meeting where they brought out samples of that, and they did a ream of paper, and here we are proactive, we're doing this. One of the piece of paper, I kid you not, looked like a paper towel taken from a gas station towel thing with notes written on it. So the ability to do that. And then the other thing is that CityWorks is designed to flow through to other departments so that other departments are all tied in. But if fields are left blank, the information does not flow through. So they have a great tool, they're not using it. The other great tool they have is on the website. It's Report a Problem. It works great. I've worked it several times. I get good results from that. But the problem is that it's under promoted, thus it's underused. So I personally attended, I believe, 6 of the 10 ward meetings. And I don't recall that information was shared and really pushed. What was pushed was, here's my business card, call them. Call your neighborhood association president, call your alderman. But they have a process in place. Just simply getting people to go to this might solve a lot of the problems. It still is a culture, we believe, of who you know to get action, and that we believe it's a reactive and not proactive. That is our perception. We believe that is also the reality. And then the other thing we found out kind of just a few weeks ago when we were doing this, there's a disconnect. So the ordinance very clearly says that the property owner is ultimately responsible. Yet when we met with the Corporation Council and brought that forward, they're like, no, no, no. It's not the property owner's fault if the renter did not put out. So we haven't really followed that thread to find out that the property owner got called into admin court and that got dismissed because the renters didn't do it. So we're not holding anyone accountable for it. But when I say that the property owner is ultimately responsible, that is in the ordinance. And not only is it in the ordinance, it's like bolded in the actual text. So there's a disconnect between we're reporting property owners, but in the end, an admin court is not holding a property owner responsible. So those are some of the key takeaways in terms of garbage. So let's look at the properties itself. So there's vacant property registry, which if you've been following the news at all, you'll know that this just started to get put into play. There's also abandoned property ordinances, there's unsafe structures, there's vehicles, and there's grass and weeds. This is extensive, all of this, and they overlap, and we haven't even dug in to see whether or not they contradict each other. We don't know that for sure. But we're really focused on the vacant property registry right now. But the city's primary goal, as stated, is to save houses and properties from demolition and city ownerships. That fines are secondary. So when we follow administrative court, and you can see some property has been in administrative court for years and years, has accumulated a large amount of fines, and then those fines get dismissed. So the goal is the fines are secondary. We want to keep the house. And so I think there's some validity in that. We believe that, but I also think there's some way that the city perhaps should be recovering at least the cost of the personnel that it takes to do this over and over and over again. So here's some common admin court outcomes. Again, continued for years, sometimes decades. Dismissal of cases with no fines levied. And also there's a lack of transparency, and there is an exclusion of hearing from citizens or neighbors that are negatively affected by this property sitting there for so long with nothing happening. Properties do fall into three categories as they were outlined to us. An owner cares but lacks the funds or resources to make the changes. The owner is unknown. They just can't track who it is. And the owner does not care or is inclined to address it. This includes non-Springfield resident owners, financial institutions like banks who get this from foreclosures and now they own the property. And surprisingly, Sangamon County. Sangamon County gets these for lack of paid property taxes. They do indicate that it is more of the vacant properties with no houses on them, but there are some with houses that don't get taken care of. I will do I guess a disclaimer on that. So that was there. I just don't know whether there was a political dig behind that to bring that forward or not. So I take that for what you want. We do know that the other takeaway is the database specifically for vacant property registry is still incomplete and incorrect. So let's talk a little bit about properties. So I'm going to bring in Bill. He's going to talk about this property that he knows. It's nearby him. Bill, tell us a little bit about the history of 1132 North 3rd.
Yes, I'd be happy to. 1132 North 3rd Street. A little history of this property. It first appeared in admin court in 2017. Violations were found to exist, and on 11/29/17, it was in default after the defendant was failing to appear or failing to answer. The property entered the circuit court system in 2018. In 2018, it appeared in circuit court 3 times. In 2019, it appeared in circuit court 8 times. In 2020, it appeared in circuit court 4 times. In 2021, it appeared in circuit court 5 times. And on 11/17/21, there was a motion to quash body attachment filed to the plaintiff, filed by the city of Springfield. On November 19th, payment order November 18th, $994, signed by the judge. Total time since the violations, 4 years, 3 months. And on November 5th, I was informed by Public Works that the property is on the demo list. And of yesterday, it is not on the registration list. So there must be a separate demo list. That concludes 1132 North 3rd Street.
All right, thank you, Bill. Carol's going to share with us a little bit about 2022 South 4th Street.
Thanks. So 2022 South 4th has been in disrepair since I moved here in 2015. Around 2018, the back addition, which you can see here, fell in. and it fell in all the way from the roof into the crawl space. I didn't turn this property into Public Works until my neighbor died of cancer in the winter of 2020. The property went into foreclosure that spring, and the bank cleaned out the contents and cleared the yard of weeds and debris, thankfully. It was pretty much of a mess. The interior photo that you can see was taken in 2020 when I was allowed into the property to see the interior for the first time. You can see that the plaster has fallen off the walls, and it has fallen off the walls on both levels, and that there is extensive mold in the basement. The property is now owned. My understanding is that the property is now owned by Fannie Mae, and it's for sale. The property was not listed on the boarded properties list, the vacant properties list that came out this fall. Public Works Assistant Director Daryl Harris told the city council that one way they know a property is vacant is whether it has electrical service or not. And indeed, this property was given new electrical service last winter. And I wonder why that happened. But now that I know that, I wonder if it was so that it could be kept off the vacant property list. When I again inquired recently, as the new boarded property list came out, Public Works Director Nate Bottom indicated that the owner had been sent a 15-day notice, that they had received the title work back, and that City Legal was in the process of filing a demolition case with the circuit court. He didn't say that the case had actually been filed with circuit court, and I tried to find it recently and could not find it, but that just could be that I don't know exactly the name of the owner. And since then, I haven't had time to follow up, but this is a pretty egregious property. Yeah, so that's it about 2022 South 4th.
Well, you're also going to share a little bit about 412 West, 412 Myrtle. It's on there as Myrtle because between Google, the city, and the county, this address might be 412 East Myrtle. It might be 412 West Myrtle. It might be 412 Myrtle, and it might also be 516 Myrtle. So I think there's some confusion when you look at the database about where does this house really exist, but Carol knows it exists, and tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, the thing that I do know is that it is actually on Myrtle Street. This is in Isles Park where I live, and the neighbors around it have been complaining about it for the 3 years since we've been asking them to report problem properties. I made the first complaint about this property on September 11th of 2018 for tall weeds, trash in the yard, open to trespass, broken windows, and fallen gutters. It was, at the time, it was abated, but it's still vacant and is subject to ongoing complaints. It's particularly, I've noticed that it's open to trespass with the front door wide open, or there are some windows in the back. You can tell if people walk on top of the garage, they can get in those two windows that are above the garage and back. It is on the vacant list, but it continues, it's not fully boarded, and it continues to be an issue for the neighborhood, and particularly for the people who live close to it.
So thank you, Carol. Thank you, Bill. So these are just examples of long-term properties that neighbors have been living next to, have complained. And there is a process. The city will say there's a process, but obviously the process doesn't work because it takes too long. So let's talk a little bit about large item pickup. So there is a large item pickup. Citizens should call and schedule with Habitat for Humanity, who's contracted by the city. Also, alternatively, Public Works can pick it up if the complaint is made, or the city can call Habitat to do that. Waste haulers by ordinance are expected to report when large items are left out that they are not responsible for. That's supposed to be a report. So I think the biggest thing that we found in terms of takeaway with this is that citizens really are unaware that there's an option to schedule a pickup. The other thing that they seem to be unaware of, or they don't care, is that don't put your items out until there is a pickup, and that a pickup, even when scheduled, is going to take a minimum of 14 days and up to 28 days if the process works correctly. So neighbors in general should really hold off about 14 days in order to give the process a chance. That's the way the process is designed, good or bad. That is just the way it works. But the issue with that is then at 14 days, you call, then you might have to have another 14 to 28 days before it's really gone, because then the city process kicks in. So you're looking at, an extended period of time where that may be out there, even if the system works exactly the way it's supposed to. So we kind of share that with you, that there is a process. It does seem to work if things get reported. So we do want to share some city strategies that were shared with us during our research and with our meetings that we had with them. I will share that overall, each city department was very receptive to a meeting and discussion. They were very open, that each indicated that they're working with or will work with any issues that we brought up. I think that some of the movement that we were beginning to see was a result of some of our conversations. So they're working on the fact that department silo culture. They want to morph that into a system in which that one system talks to every department and they're all on the same page about what's going on. They want to increase the use of the city works. I have been informed from Nate Bottom that they are in the process of upgrading the system to add a more citizen-facing information and engagement in terms of that. They're going to try to work primarily with some more citizen education efforts, primarily through public works. They are going to right now, they do not have a common software accounting system between the treasurer's office and corporation counsel or the admin court. Admin court is going to switch to a system that is more statewide so that you can see whether somebody has properties in maybe Chatham and Springfield and Riverton and things like that, to be able to do that on a more global basis. They're going to increase the focus on succession planning so the process does not break or get slowed or is on the absence because of one person or a vacant position. We got the indication that pretty much all departments have vacancies and they're working to fill those. There is information that the website will be improved. One of the things that would be nice is that, for example, when Bill wants to report a property, he sends the pictures to Public Works by email. So he has to know who to email the person. So that's, again, it's a who you know. Bill knows who to email those to. So we're hoping that the website has some updates on being able to upload pictures to get more information, or CityWorks has the ability to upload a picture. It still does not stop. The system can't work unless an inspector has to go see it. So they can't do it unless and that's fair to be able to do that. And also then they want to use some shared software and kind of begin to tie in some other departments besides Public Works and Admin, but also economic development, because they may have funds that would help save that property. So we need to rope those in. Community relations, it might be, and this has been the case, I believe, in Ward 7, where the property that had a concern, the person who had the property, it was expected that they had some health issues, some perhaps mental health issues. So maybe community relations can help make that leap or be able to get resources to them. Corporation counsel and the treasurer's office. So it's not just sitting on Public Works to do all those. These are things that were shared with us. These are things they told us they're working on. And these are things, when we talk about what we want in outcomes, are accountability that we're going to be following. So here's some key strategies that we believe need to still be addressed that are not addressed yet. Searchable reports available on the website or by request without filling out a FOIA request. Specifically, if they used an Excel formatted data for the vacant property registry, for admin court, or any kind of viewable summary, then you could sort those and you could see what was going on and you could see. So we actually took a lot of the court documents that appear on the website and we personally converted them to an Excel spreadsheet where we could suddenly then sort that by the property name and see how many times it came up in court. It was very obvious to us what it was. You could also sort by who owns the property, and it was really quickly obvious. Who are the property owners who own many properties, who just simply keep going through the mill and nobody holds their feet to the fire. But without some sort of sortable way to do that, and if we as volunteers and public citizens can take the information and turn it back to Excel, when we did talk to some of them, It starts in Excel. It can be exported in Excel. So keep it in Excel so that people can use it and can be transparent. We also think that there must be a way, and this would be an ordinance change, or this would be, I don't know how this would work exactly, but it just seems like that in admin court, if Bill Baskett lives next to the property, it's in court, that Bill Baskett's voice should be heard after he is living next to that property now for 3 years. That he should have some way to voice his concern and the impact, and that does not exist now in admin court. The people that are impacted this have no say. It is the city, it's the inspector, and it's the admin court judge. And so if the person who owns the property convinces them that I'm making progress, then that's what it is, despite the fact that the person who lives next to them can say they are not making progress, and I can prove it by pictures over time. We also think there should be parameters for progress. So something that's consistent in admin court. So for example, if you are given 30 days or 60 days or 90 days to make something, that if you did a change on date, 89, that's not significant progress. If you're supposed to get bids for a property, you should be able to know what needs to be fixed. What's the project? You should be able to get a bid. Does that happen at 30 days? You should be able to schedule work. Can that happen at 90 days? So there needs to be something that every admin court person can say, what is the parameter by saying that you have made progress? We also believe there should be regular financial impact reports, that we understand that fines are not what maybe motivate people, but we also think there should be something as a taxpayers that say, how much does it cost us to keep convening the admin court with this personnel over and over and over again for the same properties? So what is the impact? How much money are we subsidizing as taxpayers this admin court action for a small number, perhaps, of owners of properties? And then we also think there should be some sort of direct funding from those fines that assist those owners who care but lack resources. Take that money back to a block grant situation. Take that money back to economic development, to be able to say, here's somebody who really wants to care for their property. Now they've hit on hard times, or they've gotten older, or if they've done something. If we could give them $1,000 to fix this so that they don't have this, house fall down, what could it take? So those are some of the things that we think that the city should expand in terms of strategies. So you've heard me talk for a while, and you've heard some impact, and you've kind of scratched the surface of what we've done. What we want to do now is hopefully that your brains got turning and you're like, oh, this is a path to go down to. This is an action that can be taken. So we want to break out into solution-focused breakout discussions. This is not necessarily a time where we want you to complain. We want you to think about what would be a solution in this work. So for example, can you think of an idea that worked? Does something work in your neighborhood association? And maybe it could work in the whole city. Do you know something that works in another town? Those kind of things. So we want these to focus on solutions and approaches that an individual could take, a neighborhood or neighborhood association could advance, or ICON as a group could do. And we want to look at that in terms of these kind of categories, if I can put your brains in there. Awareness. How do we raise simply awareness of, for example, report a problem exists? How do we educate people? What are some initiatives we can do, and how can we move forward civic engagement? So in just a minute on your screen will be an opportunity to use your cursor and to be able to choose a room that really kind of resonated with you, where you want to dig down a little bit deeper, you want to have a little more discussion about that. So you can see the rooms that we have set up there. I'll just say that if you, for some reason, get in a room and you go, this room is not for me, you have the ability to change rooms if you'd like to. So we're thinking right now in terms of about 20 minutes of going to a room, just having a discussion, seeing where things are. If for some reason your room like you end up with like crickets. You got nothing to talk about and you've all talked back. We can always, Marissa's going to kind of be monitoring that, going from room to room. And if really the conversation slows, we're not going to just pull this out just because we have time. We're going to make sure that if we're not using time productively, that we come back into the big room. Now, we're not a very big group right now, but I think we'll break off into groups. If you end up with just 2 of you talking, sometimes the power of 2 or 3 people can get something done much better than the power of 50 people. So Marissa, I'm going to turn it over to you if you can get us going. Do we have everybody back?
I think so.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, I'm going to share my screen again, and you all tell me whether you can see it or not. All right. You see it there?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on. So our next steps really, again, as we talked about, we're just scratching the surface. So this is your invitation to engage. I heard Keisha say that they were having a good discussion. Well, these discussions need to continue. So we really want you as private citizens, at the very least, to learn the responsibilities of a property owner. That's your own property, or at least know what your neighbor's responsibilities are. Report the concerns using the Report a Problem platform on the city's website. Make sure you are allowing time for action. It can't happen overnight. It does require an inspector to go and do it. Just because you saw it, then you need to do it. So the sooner you report it, the more you get that system going a little bit. So in some cases, if it's really a health hazard, the city is required to pick it up within 24 hours after the inspector reports it. But if it's just general kind of things that are going on, they have to send a notice out to the property owner. The property owner, that takes 7 days. The property owner has so many days to try to resolve it before they go back for reinspection. So just make sure that you're giving some people some grace in terms of that to the best of your ability. Be a good neighbor, but also, give them grace. They might be working hard or 3 jobs or whatever it is. Try to help them out if you can. If it doesn't, follow up with the city department, the department director, or your city council member when there is inaction or unexplained delays. Our city council members are not really in charge of this. This isn't really their job to be able to work on this, and they're happy to do it. But I think that we as citizens, we need to take action ourselves and then follow up with them when there's not action. But we do recommend that you keep documentation of the communication from the time you report it, what was that date that you did it, to the time it's resolved, because that really does carry some weight. When we started really kind of tracking certain properties and being able to, Bill would take a picture of garbage all over, he'd report it, we'd get an email back that says it's going to be picked up in 24 hours, and he was mailing another picture 7 days later saying we're still in the same place. It shouldn't be that way, but I think we started to get some traction just because we just kind of were a dog with a bone and we were just going to keep going at it. So in terms of Icon's got unfinished business. There will be always unfinished business, but we ask you to join Icon and be involved and assist directly in a couple things. Tracking progress and just on how things are moving forward. Also some of the commitments that the city made. And also accountability, to be able to keep holding accountable the people who should be doing these things. So some of this, if you want to come to meetings, our meetings don't last very long, but there's a lot of things that you can do without having to be a committee chairperson. You don't have to spend a lot of time with this. Maybe you just have the ability to look at admin court, make a few notes, watch a couple properties, and just report that back. So some of the things we're really focusing on there is the vacant property registry. And that is the list that includes all qualified properties is what we want. Action should be taken in 1 year, and then watching admin court in regards to that. So that if you know that there's a property in your neighborhood that is vacant, check to see if it's on the property list and then help us follow that. Those are kind of things that you can help with and report back in terms of that. This then in just of general violations, what seems to be in court, what gets abated, what isn't, you're going to look at that and follow that. If you haven't read the Harvard report, I highly recommend that you read that. And I think Marissa, you were going to drop in the chat room just some links
Yep.
that could share with people. So in the chat box, you're going to find links to the Harvard report, also a link to join Icon, a little bit more about our good neighbors and looking at that annual celebration. Also, there'll be a link on how to where to go to report a problem, and also the administrative court calendar. So if you don't know where to look, it's a little hard to find that on the website. And so we want to make sure you had the links for that. But we're looking for a group of people or even one person who would be able to look at the Harvard report and be able to kind of track to be able to say, is the city taking action on this? Where are they taking action? How are they taking action? How long is it taking for them to do action? The Harvard report was really specific to property and what the city is doing with property. We also would love to have a little more interaction with neighborhood associations in terms of, can you play a role? Could you take a lead? Can you help us get to neighborhood associations? Can you help them get involved in Icon? Or could there just be citizen education and outreach? Would you be willing to go visit other neighborhood association meeting and just talk about report a problem and share things that might happen? And
Jill?
then Carol.
Jill,
Yes.
while you're speaking on that, so I have several neighborhood associations, and some of the subdivisions are newer, and I think there's some confusion in the name, inner city older. So what I hear you saying, that even the brand new ones, like I just created 2 neighborhood associations, through the Sangamon County Regional Planning, that process, getting them up and going, they would be able to join Icon?
Anybody can join Icon. We focus sort of on, we start on inner city, but to be honest, we don't use the word inner city very often. It's kind of, we just say Icon. It's kind of like, I'm just going to share, like the YMCA is actually the Young Men's Christian Association.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't use that title anymore, but that's our thing. But you know what we do as a YMCA. So it's kind of Icon is kind of the catch-all kind of term for that. But when you think of it, like I live in Ward 8, which in the neighborhood I'm looking is in Passfield Park, and people don't think of that as an older inner city neighborhood, but more and more it's inner city. And the house I live in was built in 1960. It's an older house. So it's not some of those classic ones that you see, but I think that in almost every part of the city, you're going to find houses now that are generally 25 to 30 years old in every neighborhood. Even the sums out in the West End have been there for a long time. And so these are not isolated necessarily to the inner city, but study after study will show that if you lose your inner core, just like if we lose downtown, we lose that momentum to turn the city around. So we do have to keep focusing on that inner core in terms of that, and not the sprawl that happens out and out, because we need to do those things.
So not just dealing with inner, but even the word older as well, because like I said, some of these are just new places. So
yeah.
Okay.
And I think too, every neighborhood association is welcome to join. They can join as a neighborhood association and have a person just represent that. We have several. Bill, you're the president of Lincoln Park
Neighborhood Association.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have several that represent neighborhood associations as well, and then they can go back to their neighborhood association and share what they've learned. And maybe a neighborhood association wants to take on one of these initiatives and gives us information back. I will just have Carol wave her hand, and actually let's all give Carol, because if you're a member of Icon Steering Committee in particular, Carol listens to every city council meeting with very few exceptions, takes notes and summarizes it, so the rest of us are not sitting there and watching meetings, and she does a great job with that. And then also one part of what we do is if there's an ordinance that we want to track. So we became very, very involved in the ordinance that would lower a city, I'm not going to say it right, but the property that could be for 3 years to 1 year. We were very active in trying to advocate in terms of the policy and getting that ordinance changed and having some feedback and interaction. So there's lots of ways that you can get involved as an individual, that you can get involved with your neighborhood association, or if you're just somebody who really likes to dig into data and just wants to go to town and get it to us, and you never ever want to attend a meeting in your whole entire life, we would love you for that too, but we'd love to see your faces. So those are some of the things that you have an opportunity to do within ICON. So in ICON, we are working together. Our goal is that we speak with one voice, and then we educate and motivate our elected officials and departments to act for a healthy and prosperous city. That we educate and motivate citizens to support all neighborhoods. That we solve problems with a proactive approach, and that we make a difference. So we want to thank you for that, and just know that hopefully that you've given some information, that you've kind of gotten some information tonight. Maybe you've become something very passionate about. And I just would say, if not now, when? And if not us, who? So we have just a couple minutes. If there's anybody has any specific comments before I turn it over to Bill, and he's going to kind of close us out with some thank yous.
I have a question.
Yes, Stacy.
Is there anyone from ICON that would, do you guys ever give presentations to community groups about what ICON is and what it's trying to accomplish?
We'd be happy to. And we can narrow that down to what, how broad you want it, and how specific you want it, but we'd be happy to do that.
Okay, who would I reach out to about that?
You'd reach out to Bill Basket,
okay,
right there, and you can, or there's an actual email on the website where you can just email, and that will come to actually several of us receive that, and you could just kind of do an inquiry, and we'll be happy to get that squared away.
Perfect, thank you.
Other questions or feedback?
I have some feedback. Hi, Jill.
Okay. Hi.
Me and Carol had a very, and I talked about, since I have been alderwoman, that my town hall, everyone just learned how the process worked. So when you said that people have to understand that the inspectors have to go out, and I said between me, Alderwoman DeCenso, and Alderwoman Aaron, Daryl kind of laughs to say how much we call all the time. Imagine if you have 15 to 20 complaints, concerns, or issues from each of our wards, and we only have 5 inspectors to go out. We have to give them time to get around. So I told Carol that I would like to do at least once a year a refresher, just to explain to my ward the process, but also have you all there too as ICON, so that we're bridging relationships. We had an uncomfortable conversation too, me and Carol did, about the representation on ICON, having a diversified group of people. So when you do say something to some of the neighbors on
I think, Lakeisha, we're getting your gist. We've lost some of your audio. It just slipped out a little bit, but yes, that's definitely, and that's one of the things we want to do is that, we're a small and mighty group, even on this group today, but talk to your neighborhood associations, and everyone is welcome. You want to take a leadership role, you can take a leadership role, but if you want to just be involved and have your voice heard and add your voice to ours, we welcome everyone.
Yeah, so I think that's a good idea. If the alderman,
we love your passion. We don't like your audio very well. We're kind of losing it a little bit. That's okay. Thanks for popping in and sharing. Any other comments? Carol gave a thumbs up about your conversation. All right, Bill, you want to take us out?
Yes, I will. Thank you again for joining us tonight for our presentation and discussion tonight on Springfield's problem properties. Before we leave, I would like to thank our upcoming annual sponsors, for 2022. David and Lori Farrell and O3 Internet Consulting. We appreciate your ongoing support of ICON as we move into the new year. We would also like to invite anyone who joined us tonight or who is tuning in and watching tonight's recording to consider joining ICON. You do not have to move to live in a better neighborhood. Help ICON on its mission to improve our community's older neighborhoods. We will drop the link to our membership sign up in the Zoom chat. Finally, yet importantly, I would like to thank the events committee for all their hard work in putting this presentation together. And I would also like to thank Marissa DeWeese from O3 Internet Consulting for working this evening and helping with the technical aspects of our presentation. Our next Problem Property Committee meeting will be December 9th at 5:30 p.m. on Zoom. Our first 2022 membership meeting will be at 6 p.m. on Monday, January 31st, and we hope to see everyone there. Thanks again for joining us tonight, and we wish you all a wonderful holiday season.
And that concludes tonight's event.